So this is Romans chapter 15, the scripture for the 22nd of September. Paul concludes several arguments that he's started during the book of Romans in this chapter. The first conclusion, he bookends some of the arguments from chapter 14 by admonishing believers, hey, build up your neighbors. Don't be going and kneecapping them. You want to build them up. Don't work for selfish benefits, but for the benefits of others. Now, this is going to sometimes require calling out those who serve as a bad example. This is going to sometimes require wading into conflict. Paul's not telling Christians we need to be pushovers and doormats who never engage in conflict. Rather, we're called to imitate Christ. Realize, please, that imitating Christ is going to lead sometimes to insults and rejection. This is part of the gig. And there are times when it's going to suck, but it's part of the gig. And know that every insult you bear, Christ has borne on your behalf as well. This is why I think Paul can look at the stories about the Old Testament prophets and react in hope, because nothing that was done to them can be done to us to destroy our salvation. Summing up the commands of living like a Christian that he began in chapter 12, Paul beseeches believers, live together in harmony. When we are all willing to lay down our own lives on behalf of Christ on the altar as our reasonable act of worship, as Paul says in Romans 12, when we're willing to lay down our own lives, smaller disagreements aren't going to divide us anymore. When we keep Jesus as the center, not letting anyone else infringe on that center place of worship, when we orient ourselves toward Him, we also are going to welcome all those who are on the margins because Jesus commands it. When Jesus is at the center and the center holds, we don't need to worry about who's in and who's out. We're called to care for all because that's what Jesus did. Now, reflecting on the primary argument Paul advanced throughout the bulk of the first chunk of Galatians 1 through 11, Paul concludes his point by reminding his hearers, reminding his readers that Jesus came among the Jews to fulfill Jewish promises. And that included the promise of being the hope for the nations, or the hope for the Gentiles. That this is baked into the Jewish faith. And so those of you who are Jews can't neglect this part of it. And those of you who are Gentiles can't neglect the part where Jesus himself was a Jew. So Paul's finalizing some of his diatribe here. Remember, diatribe is a hypothetical dialogue. That's how the Greeks understood it anyway. Now, Paul's not content with simply one reference of Scripture to back this up. Paul's not a proof texter. He's going to use a body of evidence. And here he uses multiple Psalms, Psalm 18 and 117, if you'd like to look them up. Psalm 18 is quite a bit longer. Psalm 117 is just a couple verses. He uses Deuteronomy 32, the end of it, and then Isaiah 11. And Isaiah 11 is one of the most beautiful passages that talks about how Gentiles do have hope, that Jesus came as the Messiah to give hope to the nations. God's plan has been constant throughout history. From even the inception of the promise to Abram, God was intending to be a blessing to Abraham so that Abraham could be a blessing to others. Abraham, or Abram as he was called then, was blessed to be a blessing. Now, after summing up his arguments, Paul shares some of his vision and some of his mission to his readers or to his hearers. His focus has, up until this point, been on sharing the gospel with Gentiles, and particularly those who've not heard it yet. Paul's not keen on retreading ground that somebody else has already broken for him. Paul wants to be the first. This, I think, puts some of Romans 10 into a bit sharper relief, where Paul talks about how can they hear unless somebody tells them? How beautiful are the feet who bring good news. That's to Paul what evangelism is all about, being the first to bring the gospel of Christ to other people who've not heard about it. Now, in addition to this, Paul also updates the Romans on his travel plans and his apprehension about what may occur as he brings this gift from the communities of faith around the Mediterranean to Jerusalem. He asks the Romans to pray for him, and you may remember from Acts 21 through 28, this series of rapid events toward the end of the book of Acts, that things didn't altogether go as planned. However, Paul likely did get to see the Roman believers after being arrested and sent to Rome toward the end of the book of Acts. Now I wonder, how would you describe to other Christians your God-given mission? That's all for Romans chapter 15. Tomorrow, the 23rd of September, we'll look at Romans chapter 16. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.